Okay, so there's a part two here. So we're part two of how women would control other women in a Gynarchy. I think that the economic issue, like the economics of your community, are necessary. I do think that. And the reason why is because why do so many women look to men to provide? Well, some of these women are disabled or they have serious health issues, or they are genetically predisposed to having problems during and after pregnancy. And there's a reason why some people are a hate welfare. They refer to it as like daddy welfare or something, like creepy name, but the reason why that welfare would be a problem for people who want to have control over women is because it allows women to get financial support without being wholly dependent on a man. That's the entire reason why so many men are pissed off about welfare. It's because without those social programs, women would be forced to depend on them, and then they could force a mate to life situation if they can just kick them out of the workforce. Yeah, that's basically what it is. If you want to know why people really hate welfare, they will tell you it's because they don't like people that are lazy, blah blah blah. They'll come up with all these personal attacks. The real reason is simply because they just can't. They want to have control over people. And the easiest way to have control over someone is to make them financially dependent upon you or to convince you that that's a good idea. And so, uh, if you are going to have a community in which women are running things, then that you must necessarily, like, let me put it this way. If women are going to have control over other women, then they should be prepared to take responsibility for the lives of the other women. In other words, if the woman doesn't want to work, then there's got to be some kind of arrangement in order for her to be taken care of financially. Like if she wants to have, in other words, what I'm saying is if you try to place the person in a situation where they feel like they need a man because they're being abandoned, or in other words, you need sisterhood. You need a system that provides some kind of social or financial support for people who are either struggling, are going undergoing health issues, or who have disabilities. Because without that support, they will turn even to abusive people or bad people if it means having food in their belly. This is especially true if Social Security and those other programs are cut, which they very well could be in the future. And if these programs are axed, then you do have to have a plan. And let's say you're in a different land. This is a entirely different situation. If you are a gunner community, if you have, let's say you have a political, system you're supporting, you should always support a system that is allowing you to have the social safety nets for the women and the girls. Because without those social safety nets, those individuals will feel more compelled to turn to people to be provided for, uh, and that's a problem. And you have to address that economic issue, which is if it is not economically viable for somebody to live on their own or to have the quality of life that they want, if you're not willing to either provide that or provide at least a base level of stability for those individuals who have whatever reasons they have, who are not getting enough support for their children, if you are not communitarian, if there's not a strong enough interaction between them, if the women are not going to take responsibility for caring about the other women and girls, like there's no financial care, there's no personal care. If that doesn't happen, then they're going to try to find somebody who's willing to invest the money and the time into doing that. Even if it's only at first that they put on the guise of care and concern before they completely go mask off and fuck with those people. But I do believe that does have to do with this discussion, right? But I also believe that there is an understanding that if you're going to be part of that society, you have to that should be part of the thing, which is like, hey, you want to be part of it? We'll look out for you. We'll take responsibility for you. In other words, control. But that control in my view, should never come from a place of that lacks compassion or empathy. In other words, if your control is based solely on judgmentalness or being judgmental or hateful, then I don't think that that control can ever really last before people rebel against it. There has to be a justification uh, for it. There has to be something that you can really rally behind, as I've mentioned before. So I do think that that's important, insofar as how you're going to um, how you're going to exercise control, because it is a form of control, because you do have that control. If there's a big enough reason, you could take that money away, could take those resources away, if they violate a big enough law. But I think that creating a situation where no matter what, they're not going to starve to death, I think that that actually lessens the likelihood of them seeking a situation in which they are financially dependent. Obviously, whoever is invited in the community needs to be vetted, because if it turns out you're dealing with like somebody who's into, like a woman who's into maledom, obviously that person is not going to be compatible with a gynarchist community. They're not. They should go somewhere else. They don't belong here. And so there does have to be a standard for who you admit into a community and who you want to be part of your community, and who you acknowledge is somebody that is either an infiltrator or somebody who is trying to subvert whatever it is that you're doing and destroy it. So there can't be exceptions for everybody. There has to be the acknowledgement of, do you have gynarchic values? So if you're talking about control, well, the first thing is, are you even one of us? Because if you're not, then what are you doing here? Obviously, it's not, you don't have good intentions if you're doing that. If you're here, like, it's like you're coming up for the wrong job interview. So there's that. Now, the next part of the control is what policies would be considered harmful to women. And this is what I mean by policies. If your economic policies are too stringent and too vicious, then those women are going to either abandon that community, or they're going to bring people into that community or try to bring something that will benefit their personal situation. I think that in any gynarchic community, you're going to have to do a balancing act between what is good for the financial disposition of the woman versus what is good for the ecosystem of that community. Because if you allow too many women's financial positions to be compromised, then they're not just going to lay down and die. Just They're not going to just blindly die for loyalty to a cause. They're going to want to survive. They're going to want to pass on their genes and so on and so forth. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to see what their options are. And there's plenty of men out there, plenty of predators that take advantage of individuals who are vulnerable, who are looking for somebody to feel that financial end of things. And some women will take that on even if they know it means them getting abused, as shocking as that is to say that happens. So whatever your economic policies are, whatever your political policies, everything has to be considered within the balancing act between the individual and the society, just as with any other political system. You have to consider what is good for the individual versus what is good for the society. So in other words, what kind of speech is acceptable in public for a woman to say in a gynarchy, versus what kinds of beliefs are acceptable to express via posters, whatever. And will women agree to honor this? Will they honor this gynarchic social contract? Will they protect it? And how will they protect it? Is there going to have to be some kind of surveillance network set up to keep an eye on everybody? I really don't know how far you want to go. Does that include the elimination of privacy? In other words, in order to prevent an infiltrator from the community, would you be placing like listening devices in everybody's home? Would there be cameras in people's homes? Like, how far are you willing to go to ensure their safety and well-being? And also the same thing with like speech. Like, are the women allowed, like, what are the range of opinions and thoughts and ideas that they're allowed to have within that society? So I think I mean, if you're not careful about that, that could be harmful too. Because if you lean too hard on thoughts and opinions and feelings, then you have oppression. But on the other hand, if you don't lean hard enough at all, if you lean too little, then you enable certain kinds of individuals to poison and engage in the act of annihilation towards everything that you've ever built. So I do think that matters. So I mean, obviously there has to be room for some level of disagreement. The only question is on what can they disagree about, what is considered reasonable to disagree about, and what is not reasonable to disagree about. So unless there's some way to for the individuals to talk about this, to say, okay, this is okay. We can have disagreements on political policy, but is that within like some kind of like larger framework or something? I don't know how to put this. It's kind of like, for example, let's put it this way. If the disagreement is on whether women in that society, let's put it this way. Here's a policy that could be debated about at the political level, right? Should chastity be enforced on all the men in that society, in that community, by the political leaders of the community and whatever supervised police force of women that make it up? Or should that decision be left solely up to the woman who is in charge of that submissive male? Like, who gets to decide, who gets the final say on how to enforce that? Is it the woman who enforces it, or is it, for instance, that political body through the use of a police force or whatever that enforces that chastity stuff in public? And this is again where you have to figure out the individual rights versus the rights of the society. So if you have a woman who decides, I don't really care if he wears chastity or not, and then that guy goes out in public and he ends up doing something reprehensible or heinous, or he gets into trouble. Now, should there be a punishment for this individual, for this woman? And see, this is where you kind of get into this trouble, right? Of how much should you be trying to dominate a dominant woman? How much should you be trying to control a person who is controlling already, who is controlling their personal affairs? And you might have some people saying, well, the woman should face some kind of accountability for not adhering to the laws of the society, and you could lay out your arguments there. But then you could have the woman saying, well, this is my decision, and if I can't have control over my own family unit, then, why should I participate in this society? And I've got all these other things I need to take care of. If he's not taking responsibility for it, why not just deal with him individually? Why blame me for something that he did, a choice that he made? So, this can become actually very complex very quickly, which is, who do you hold responsible? Do you hold the man responsible for this? Do you hold the dominant woman responsible for this? Or does the society have to take responsibility to ensure that every male in the society wears chastity? And I think you're going to have a varying range of opinions on that matter. I don't think that everyone's going to agree 100% on that. But my personal opinion is I wouldn't punish the woman. And the reason is because I believe that the more you lean on the individual households, the more you try to push them, the more you try to control what they can or can't do, the greater the backlash. So I kind of feel like you have to have a very hands-off approach to the judicial system regarding these women, unless there's something really severe going on. Like, we're talking about if there's like severe human rights violations, or the people, or like murder. In other words, something non-consensual happening that is not conducive to the growth of the community. But I do think that when you're talking about women controlling other women, In other words, women politicians versus individual households. You have to keep all this in mind.